Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International. It's now time for our first topic of discussion for today, and we're going to be talking about the inauguration of the Arab Organization for Aviation, Culture and Tourism, and as well as Sustainable Development. On Wednesday, Cairo had witnessed the inauguration of the African Organization for Aviation, Culture, Tourism and Sustainable Development, Afro Act. And to shed more light on this topic, we're most delighted to be joined here in the studio by Mrs. Sherin Ramadan, and she's the Assistant Secretary General for Human Capital and Membership Affairs. First of all, good morning, Mrs. Sherin, and thank you so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
Good morning, thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Sherin.
Good morning.
And let's first talk about the Afro Act. What is Afro Act, and tell us more about it. How did the idea spark to you?
Okay, as you said, the Afro Act is an African organization for culture, tourism, sustainable development, economic sustainable development. It has been founded by Dr. Hossein Darwish. He's an expert in founding NGOs, and he works at the Arab League. He works in tourism and training. He got the idea after we had the chairmanship of the African Union. He was thinking of an organization that is meant to develop Africa in an integrated way. That the organization, as you see from the name, has so many sectors into it. We are not specialized in one area of concern. We are kind of concerned about the sustainable development of Africa in general. So we have we want to cover all sectors that can achieve the sustainable development of all Africa. We have expertise from tourism, culture, trade, art, education, manufacturing. We have actual experts joining the organization, and each one of them, some of them have their own corporate institutions, some of them are experts in their fields. But having all these experts on board helps to kind of support the idea of integrated solutions to develop Africa in all areas.
If you can tell us about the inauguration was just held on Wednesday. If you can tell us more about the goals and the objectives of the organization.
Okay, as I said, the goals of the organization is to achieve sustainable development, integrated sustainable development in all areas. Africa is one of the very richest continents in the world. It has potential, it has natural resources, human capital, even financial capital. It has all the potential to become a rich, developed continent, yet this is not happening. But the solution is not necessarily to cover one or the other. Like giving aid to the poor, to the hunger, is not only going to fix the problem. So what we think here is fixing the problem is we have to offer integrated solutions. So our goals is to address areas like extreme poverty, women empowerment, desertification, promoting trade, promoting manufacturing, promoting tourism. What we're going to start with is tourism. We have projects that are coming up very soon. We have thought of tourism as the first step. It's kind of bridging between countries or between African countries, because we think the first step to be able to develop Africa as a whole is for the African nations to culturally exchange, to have a cultural exchange among each other. You'll be surprised, I was actually surprised when I knew that some countries, like one country in Africa has up to 400 languages, for example. These are things that we don't know. We don't recognize languages altogether. I mean, if you hear someone speaking Italian or French or Spanish, you can kind of, even if you don't speak the language, you can tell. But as for African languages, we're not very familiar. And other things, other aspects, touristic aspects, for example. We would be surprised to find that some of the African countries are very rich in touristic attractions and so on. So the first step for us is to open a touristic bridge between neighboring nations, so we can be able to get to exchange cultures and get to introduce or bridge between countries to start our actual work on ground.
That sounds great. And also, people, when they are listening to this very interesting project on your side, would like to know who are the people who are cooperating with you? I mean, who are the members of this organization? Are they volunteers? Are they people who are interested? Are they people who are going to assist you, each with his institution? If you'd like to elaborate.
As I said, when Dr. Hussam Darwish had the idea to found AfroAct, he was concerned in getting expertise in certain specialities like tourism and trade and manufacturing and so on. So AfroAct is basically has secretary generals for each and every sector, and each secretary general is an expert in his field. People are expert in tourism, people who have in IT, digital transformation, marketing and advertising, people who are real experts in their field. And each Secretary General is covering one sector, and there will be teams working with them. We also have consultants who joined the organization as consultants, not as members or as Secretary General or staff. So basically we have this and that, and then what we plan to do is to work with institutions, with embassies, with African embassies, African institutions, international companies working in Africa or concerned with the African issue, to collaborate the effort of all these people. But the area of expertise comes from our Secretary Generals, are the people who have the expertise in their field, or going to be covering the actual projects, the technical part in the projects that we're going to establish.
Mrs. Sherin, has there been like a rolling work plan that has been set forth for the strategies and the strategy of the organization, or not yet?
Well, there is a main idea, like there is a strategic objective of the organization, as you can see in the organization profile. Our main objective is not the objective, the strategy that we're going to be using is to try to achieve integration between all the sectors. For example, if the problem with Africa is not the lack of anything, and it's not the presence of anything. Africa has an abundance of resources, an abundance of even financial capital, as I said, and human capital. But the point is to integrate all this to work together. Like if you get to, if you do have the financial capital and you don't have the skilled human capital able to utilize the natural resources and so on, then you will not be able to achieve this. If you feed the people and then you don't get them jobs, they will not be able to. This is not sustainability. So what we aim to achieve sustainable development and continuity. So basically the strategy is to kind of integrate all the sectors together. Each sector is going to be working on its own. We're going to start with tourism, as you said. We're going to have projects in a lot of areas, but we need to integrate these efforts all together to achieve the big picture of sustainable development.
Yes. Just a follow-up question. Who are your partners? Are you going to be working with ministries, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for instance, the Ministry of International Cooperation, or with African, if you can tell us more about your partners, or is it going to be from the private sector, if you can tell us more?
Right, okay. As I said, AfroAct is a non-profit, non-governmental institution. It's non-governmental whatsoever. Our partners are going to be like, for example, as I said, some of the Secretary Generals have corporations of their own. So we have institutions backing us up when it comes to the projects that we're going to establish. As the partnerships, the future objective for partnerships, we're going to be partnering with embassies and African embassies in Egypt. We're going to be partnering with African companies working in the region, even international companies working in Africa, or even institutions that have the same concern of African development. We're going to be working closely with the Ministry of sorry, not the ministry, the union, the African Union.
The African Union Commission.
We are going to partner with all institutions that are aiming to the development of Africa, to collaborate efforts as well, to get the support, maybe get the sponsorship, get the interest in the projects that we are doing.
Right. The next question that would come next to Karim's question, which is the common interests or the common topics that would come to the interest of both the Egyptian side and the African concerning, for example, women and children, health, education, I mean the vital files. What are you going to prioritize over in your agenda? What are your coming priority topics?
Okay, again, I don't believe that we have a priority because, as I said, we cannot go have the priority of hunger, for example, or health or whatever. That doesn't mean it's not important. It is going to be happening simultaneously with all our sectors. Maybe we're going to start, again, as I said, with tourism. This tourism event that we're planning for, or is aimed to open the African countries and to bridge the gap between African countries, so we can start working on all these sectors in collaboration and simultaneously. We are targeting women empowerment, eliminating poverty, health, education, vocational training, you know, all areas as mentioned in the organization profile. We aim at covering all these aspects: trade, manufacturing, digital transformation, marketing and advertising. But we think is that tourism is going to be the start for, or the opening the gate for being able to market Africa to, tourism sometimes is the engine that helps you achieve sustainable development, because
it's soft diplomacy.
Exactly, it's soft diplomacy, and it brings in profit, and it opens bridges between countries, and there is room for that for now, because what we know from the latest reports is the middle class in Africa is kind of rising. The middle class is becoming more, and what we know about middle class is 4 out of 5 travelers travel to neighboring countries. So instead of our tourism, African tourism, going outside, for example, I'm not very much familiar with people, for example, planning for a vacation. They say, okay, I'm going to go for a vacation in Africa this month. We're not familiar with that. But once we get to know and open the gate to know that Africa has a very, very attractive places for tourism, then we can start having the wheel going on, so we can start doing all sorts of projects. And we have integration between the African countries.
It seems from what you're saying that your strategy is multidimensional.
Of course.
If you can tell us about your sector, which is human capital, I believe it's the catalyst of any success for any organization or institution. If you can tell us more about the sector that you're representing.
Right, okay. The sector that I'm representing, it's 2 parts. It's human capital and membership affairs. But basically, human capital, my expertise is human resources and human capital. And before joining AfroAct, whenever I was talking about the importance of human capital, Africa was one of the main concerns that I had, and one of the biggest example you can give is a continent that has 30% of the world's mineral reserve, has 12% of the oil produced in the world is produced in Africa. It's the second largest continent in population, in land area. So it has all the potential to be the richest continent, but still it's underdeveloped. And this, one of the reasons, it can't be the main reason, but it's one of the reasons for that, is not having the human capital, which is the skilled, educated, able manpower to be able to utilize the resources available. So the sector I'm concerned with is the human capital development and managing the human capital, having more skilled manpower. As I said, human capital, as I always say, is not the number of population. It is the number of skilled, healthy, educated, able workforce. Okay, so the more skilled workforce you have, the more human capital you have, not the more population. So part of this is developing youth, developing people, education, training, technical training. vocational training, all sorts of areas related to developing human capital. And under developing human capital as well is health initiatives, because human capital, you can't have a larger human capital with unhealthy individuals. So health initiatives, human empowerment, child, the whole human development area that can contribute to a bigger human capital.
The idea of the human capital in itself as an introduction is very tempting and very encouraging, because President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have stressed almost in every forum that he attends, and have stressed in the last youth forum that was taken, the monthly one, the National Youth Forum, on building the Egyptian character, building the citizen in general, the Egyptian African. And there is the APLP, which is also empowering their potentials, empowering their skills, and preparing them to be the future leaders. So investing on the human capital is very good. But also investing on in aviation, for example, is an exceptional idea. And if you like to elaborate over it, how are you going to take steps investing in aviation?
Okay, allow me to first address what you said about President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi being focused on the human element in Egypt. What is interesting about the experience, or about what President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is doing, is again the integration between the development, the sustainable development, but the integration between sectors. For example, we're focused on the Egyptian character, or the human element, but we're also focusing on health, education, and projects, mega projects. So having a skilled human capital cannot work if you don't have the job opportunities, if you don't have the life standard or standard of living that is better, if you don't have health initiatives, if you don't have, so the experience here is, our idea is derived from this integrated experience. As for aviation, because we have experts working in the field of aviation as well, and it's one of the obstacles of tourism within Africa is two things, or three things actually. The difficulty of applying or getting, the logistics like visas, flights, and things like that, and not having a flight route that is suitable. You don't have direct flights, you don't have suitable airlines going direct flights to all African continents. So the aim is having airlines, trying to work with airlines, whether local airlines, international airlines, African airlines, to have more routes around Africa, to be able to facilitate not only the tourism covers the recreational tourism, business tourism, even medicinal tourism. So we are going to be trying to work with institutions related to aviation to kind of solve this problem and facilitate the tourism between African countries.
Yes, moving on from aviation to health, it's a very important sector, I believe, and the Ministry of Health had sent a mission to Juba recently to treat Africans from hepatitis C, those detected with the virus, building on the 100 million Healthy Lives initiative by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Are we going to see some Afro-Act-led initiatives such as the one that I just mentioned?
In fact, in this area, again, it's in the profile. This is one of our first projects. Is we want to create or initiate a health initiative similar to the 100 million Healthy Lives, which is 2 billion healthy lives. It's like all over, an extension for this project, and it's all over Africa. Not only hepatitis C, we're going to be working with hepatitis C and other health concerns, because there are other health concerns in areas in southern Africa. And so this is one of the upcoming projects, is an initiative for healthy lives similar to the one in Egypt.
definitely we're going to be following up closely on the work that you're doing, and we hope that we can further discuss your success and the initiatives that's going to be led by the Afro Act. Thank you so much, Mrs. Sherin Ramadan, Assistant Secretary General for Human Capital and Membership Affairs of the Afro Act. Thank you so much for your insight, and thank you so much for being with us on The Breakfast Show.
Thank you. Thank you.
And dear viewers, now we move on to a short break, and then I'll be back to resume the remaining segments of The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International.